Welcome back to Open Source. I'm here with Michael Hainsworth. Sadly, our final segment, although please come back. Dude, what the hell?
Well,
How do you know everything?
whenever you want me, man, I'm yours.
Okay, we talked a lot about social media, we talked about AI, we talked about legacy media. There's so, I mean, especially like the media landscape is quite broad. There's so many different aspects, right? But let's talk about the future a little bit. Which technologies, and maybe you want to interpret that to be like which forms of media are going to last? Which are the most relevant forms of media for the future?
I think the primary form, based upon the conversation we've had today, is still text-based journalism. That is the easiest to consume for the most part, and is the one that allows the sober second thought and the opportunity to make sure that you've got the facts. Video is a secondary consideration because we like to consume video. We like to look at things. That's a lot more for a short form scenario. And it's for citizen journalism particularly. I think you're going to get a lot of opportunity for people who do short form content in a TikTok style. Rachel Gilmore is a perfect example of that. Canadian journalist legend, lost her job at Global News for no real reason other than budget cuts, now is independently creating content and is doing an incredibly successful job at 60 seconds at a time. So that's one primary, secondary way that we'll consume journalistic type content. Podcasting may be a third, but that is going to be a more longer form type of thing that when you think about things like true crime podcasts, those are incredibly successful. There's an element of journalism associated with that as well. This conversation you and I are having right now would be a perfect audio podcast. In reality, nobody really wants to see my face anyway.
It's not true. The number of women who have smashed our email knowing that you're here. Okay, so Michael, it's interesting too, because you're talking about your career when you started, and it struck me, right? Because I was like, does that even exist today? Like, would an 18-year-old have that kind of like learn from the bottom, kid, push the buttons and work your way up? Like, if you were 18 years old today, right, in today's sort of like media landscape with all the tech, with all the opportunities, how would you do? Would you do the same thing, like call that uncle or whatever and start at the bottom, or TikTok, or like, what do you think the smartest way is for like an 18-year-old who wants to be a journalist? What would you tell them?
I would tell them, first of all, go to journalism school, learn the craft, particularly, because that's super important. We learned the hard way that right-wing nut job journalists have been receiving thousands upon thousands of Russian rubles for their work and never once questioned why they were getting paid $100,000 for a single video. Come on. Those are people who should not be in the business. They didn't go to school for it. So go to school for it, first of all. But secondarily, recognize that you need to be a jack of all trades. Whether or not you're a master of one is a separate thing. But I have the ability to present, write, edit, all of these things. I can do everything that's associated with my craft. And that's critical because sometimes it's easier, faster, less expensive for me to do a lot of the legwork than it is to farm it out to people who are dedicated editors, dedicated writers, people of that sort of thing. So there's that one element. Secondarily, once you're out there, get to work. Build yourself a foundation of content that you've created that you can then turn to, if you want to get into legacy media, a legacy media provider and say, look what I can do. You need me to help bring you into the 21st century. Or the alternative is to take a whole different funding model. Patreon is a perfect example of that. There are people who are making a living as YouTube stars. And you might think that's not journalism, but a lot of it truly actually is. I'm a huge virtual reality nerd. I've got 3 or 4 people that I consume content from every single day. They're not traditional journalists, but they are acting as so in ways that the tech media never really could. So get the experience, do it yourself, show the world what you're capable of, step back and wait for the money to roll in.
Michael Hainsworth with a mic drop. That's what we call it. Dude, honestly, like, thank you so much for coming on the show. Like, I learned from a lot of guests, but especially because it's like I am actively doing this job and I just respect everything you've done. And you really have taught me a lot. So just thanks for coming on, man.
No, well, thank you for your time.